Today, the world lost a tremendous icon, someone who had truly entertained and inspired people for decades. And I'm certain I can say with absolute sincerity that his work will continue to influence for decades more, for generations more. He was an actor, a director, a musician, a photographer, a supporter of the arts and sciences. He was Leonard Nimoy. And on this special take on The Real Deal, we just wanted to have a moment to acknowledge what a tremendous body of work this man did and the influence that he had. Brian, I know you and I both are not that far off in our ages, actually, and we both, I think, would agree that I can't remember a time in my life that Leonard Nimoy or Mr. Spock in some way, shape, or form was not in it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Of course, I grew up, in the 70s, and we'd always come home from school and watch Star Trek. I was not quite old enough that I saw it when it first aired.
Right.
But of course, it was your afternoon television. You always caught Star Trek after you came home from school. The other TV show that I remember Leonard Nimoy from my youth was a series called In Search Of.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it. I've never had a chance to see it, but I have.
Yeah, it was about he do stories about Dracula and witchcraft and the Loch Ness monster and UFOs, and I mean it really built my love as a child of just kind of weird stuff.
Sure.
And that was another kind of afternoon show that I loved to watch as a kid, and you can see a lot of those. I think a lot of the In Search Of you can find on YouTube, but it was a wonderful show that kind of dipped its toe into science, but also kind of odd type of things.
Sure. Well, for me, another show that I remember, a big part of my early childhood was a show he hosted on Nickelodeon called Lights, Camera, Action.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really, at that time I was really forming a love of cinema, and that show, with all of its behind the scenes on how things were made and stuff, was something that really appealed to me. And it was neat for me to see him as not Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
But to see him as the actor and, of course, a director as well. And, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have learned about a film like Rock and Roll. That show was where I first learned about rock and roll, and I really had to see it. And Leonard Nimoy was who, hosted us through that about that. And, it's amazing the influence he had. We think about him as Mr. Spock, and of course he also had appearances on like Mission Impossible and many other things in that time. But I think a lot of times we forget about the fact that he was a very prolific director. Not only did he direct Star Trek 3 and then Star Trek 4, which was the highest grossing of the entire franchise until the reboot stuff. He also delivered 1987's biggest hit that year, which was 3 Men and a Baby. Yeah. And I don't think anybody would have ever thought that serious, logical Mr. Spock would have delivered a heartwarming comedy. Yeah. But he sure did. And it was really a tremendously popular film.
Oh, yeah. Well, Leonard Nimoy always had this great sense of humor. When I was in junior high, in our school library, I found a copy of I Am Not Spock.
Yes.
A wonderful book. Lots of humor, and gave you sort of a background of what was going on, when they were making Star Trek, and just basically him living with this character that was much bigger than he was.
That's true. Today I learned the news at work, and it's funny. When I first heard about it, I was just like, oh, what a shame. Yeah. And as the day went on, and I started thinking about all the different things that he has done that has influenced me, it suddenly really started seeping in. And I literally had to find a few moments to get some tears out, honestly. And I didn't think that would ever be the case, but I think what happens is, I know a lot of people that have actually, I've messaged with today, and a very dear friend of mine, Sheila Jarrett, actually sent me a message on Facebook. It was like, I'm at a loss for words. Should we be holding a vigil or something? Because I just don't know how I should feel right now. And I think I kind of was able to figure out why it is that his passing has impacted so many of us. The things I think about when I think about him, for me, there's the idea that so many of us who are into Star Trek and especially that character are what you would call like the geeks. Yeah. We're science nerds.
Oh yeah.
And I think what we all found comfort in with Spock and with Leonard Nimoy is that he allowed us to feel okay about that.
Yeah.
Maybe the rest of the world didn't.
Yeah.
But he sure did.
Yeah.
And I think that is why his passing, I think many of us have been trying to put a reason to it why we feel the way we feel. I've had so many people say, you know, this is so goofy. Why do I feel so sad about the passing of a guy I've never even met? Yeah. You know, this is a guy that was on a TV show where he had fake pointy ears. Why am I feeling this? And I think that that's really what it comes down to. The other side of it is, you know, we always say if you could meet someone and you could say thanks, you know. For you, you know, it was an afternoon thing when you came home and you watched Star Trek. For me, it was in the evenings, and my dad and I would watch the syndicated episodes of it. Right. And he had already, of course, seen those episodes, but he really enjoyed watching them with me, and it was a real bonding thing for us. And then I remember when the first Star Trek movie came out, Star Trek the Motion Picture, I didn't get to see it in the theater, but when it came on HBO, it was a big deal for me to sit down and watch it with him. I had the Happy Meals and stuff with the Klingon ship and the Enterprise and everything, but you know, to sit down and watch it, and then he took me to the theater to see Wrath of Khan. And I remember even as a 6-year-old kid, I was devastated at the end of that film. And as I was thinking about that today, I was like, you know, I will never watch that film the same way again. And I don't think anybody who's a fan of the franchise will. No. That ending will now ring, I think, more poignant than we could have ever imagined, and more than we ever would want it, or you know, or would want to imagine that it would. Yeah. But you know, Brian, as we wrap things up, you know, any final thoughts that you have?
Well, I mean, to call him a cultural icon seems to be shortchanging him.
It truly does. It does. It truly does. His work, if you think about it, he was Spock. Yeah. Through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and even into the 2010s. Yeah. That's 6 decades. Yeah. That man was that character. Yeah. And it was never stale. No. It was always real. I even love that he could lampoon himself on The Simpsons. I still laugh out loud at the end of that when he's like, "My work here is done." Well, you didn't do anything, didn't I? And he just teleports out. It still makes me laugh so hard every time. And Leonard Nimoy is someone who I always thought that if you were to meet him, I just truly believe, and I've never heard differently, that I just think he would be that warm, genuine person that you would expect him to be. Oh yeah. So you know, from us here at The Real Deal, to all of you who are mourning him, that's okay. And I hope that we've been able to maybe help you nail down why it is that you do. On a personal level, this one stings. Yeah. It truly does. Yeah. This one stings. Much like Harold Ramis did last year, this one stings this year. But, you know, really and truly, thank you, Leonard Nimoy, for decades of entertainment. Thank you for decades of enlightenment. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of the arts and sciences. Thank you for giving me something to bond with my father, and something that I will be looking forward to bonding with my son. So many people have quoted this today, but I still feel it's appropriate, and that is that of all the souls that I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human. Of any celebrity I think we could imagine that we would have ever met. You know, I just feel like there's a guy who was that. And I guess to close it up, we say Godspeed to you, Mr. Nimoy, and of course, live long and prosper. We have been, and always shall be, your fans.